Hello, my name is Samantha Simmons, and I'm an upcoming sophomore at Georgia College. I'm a creative writing major, so I've really enjoyed taking this theater history class, learning a lot about plays and theater, which ties into creative writing. However, I did find it really difficult to pick which project to do. I'm terrible at acting and memorizing lines, so I didn't want to do the first one. And then I've had to write papers all summer, so I didn't really want to do the third one. And then I didn't really think I could build anything, so I wasn't too keen on the second one either. But I decided to go ahead and do it because I thought of a costume idea. I'll get to that later in my presentation. So the topic I picked for my presentation was Elizabethan court jesters. The reason I picked that is because through my reading of the 10 chapters that we had to do, I noticed that they were mentioned a lot, but there wasn't really a lot of detail given about them. And so I was curious as to kind of what their background history was, because they were present in almost every theater, just not a major part of it. So I really wanted to know more about them and why they were present in every theater if they weren't such a major role. They were just kind of in the background. And so I kind of wanted to see where they came from. So in order to do my project, I researched Elizabethan court jesters into Google, and I sifted through and just kind of looked through background information and pulled out fun facts that I found interesting, and I hoped that y'all would find interesting. And so that's what I'm going to talk about for the first few minutes of my presentation. And then I Googled the costumes that they wore and I recreated it. So I'm going to spend the first part kind of sifting through the information just to give you some background, and then I'm going to go step by step through my costume and kind of explain to you why they wore what they wore and what they signified, and just more detail on it. I had a lot of fun researching this. I thought it was really interesting, so I really hope that all of you enjoy my project and learn a lot, and thank you so much. Okay, here it comes. Elizabethan court jesters did not play a major role in the court life, but their silly antics really brightened up the theater. That's really what the whole point of having a court jester was about. Their history can be dated as far back as the medieval era of the Middle Ages. This is the era that they're most closely connected with, so when people talk about court jesters, for the most part, that's the era that they're talking about. The main job of the medieval court jester was to bring joy to the monarchs who may have been upset or been feeling sick. They would call on the court jesters to come and cheer them up. They were hired to charm, excite, and amuse their masters, as well as to thwart the over-oppression of state affairs. During this time, a well-known psychological concept was held that the liveliness of the jester actually was supposed to aid the digestion of his lord at mealtimes. So when the jester was eating, when the lord was eating, he would call in the jester to tell him jokes or make him laugh, and that was supposed to make his food go down easier. So I thought that was kind of an interesting fact. Though jesters are typically thought of as low on the totem pole, they actually had much more freedom than most other people did in the court. That's kind of a little known thing, and they were allowed to freely speak their minds without worrying about offending people because everything they did was in jest. So if they were mocking someone or throwing jibes at the lords or the nobles or the ladies, it was accepted because it was in a satirical manner, and they were the only people that were allowed to say such things. Though the jesters came from a wide variety of backgrounds, most of them were well educated, which is kind of funny because they spent their whole life making jokes and not doing anything serious, but they're actually very smart for the most part. Started from. Jesters tended to develop meaningful relationship with the kings and queens. The reason behind this was that the kings and queens had so many fake relationships, is what it said in the research, that people were only nice to them because of their high stations in life. So people would give them false compliments and, try to kind of suck up to them, I guess. But they didn't have to worry about that. And the jesters, they were kind of their confidants, is the way they phrased it. The royals found solace in their valued connections with the jesters because they shared truthful values and insights and such. While many royals esteemed their jesters as confidants, this role was really set aside for the elite jesters. More common was the jester role as a healer instead of really a confidant. Medieval doctors thought that human health was controlled by four forces called humors. These four forces are sanguine, melancholia, choleric, and phlegmatic. Today, these humors are considered emotional states. The balance or imbalance of these humors was believed to produce four distinct emotional states, which could be rebalanced either by doctor's craft or court jesters. One source of information I found by Michael Best described two common forms of court jesters, the natural and artificial. So first I'm going to talk about the natural, which is, okay, if someone is born maybe what we would call physically or mentally disabled, they would be a natural jester because they were literally born foolish is how they would phrase it. Poor nutrition and inadequate medical care produced a much larger number of such people than we are accustomed to today, so it was very, very common. And some of them were lucky or clever enough to make a living from their ailments. So instead of being born crippled or something, they wouldn't beg on the streets for money. They would make a career out of their cripple deformity. It was a society that found madness entertaining, whereas today mental illness is something to be taken very seriously. Back then they laughed at it, which would be really inappropriate in today's time. The artificial fool, on the other hand, was deliberately odd or eccentric, acted with simplicity. It was in order to entertain and sometimes indirectly to give advice. When I was doing my research, an example that was given is a line in King Lear that said, "This is not altogether fool, my lord," where it kind of shows that they were clever. The artificial fools were. They were acting foolish, but in order to get a point across, kind of, is what that line exemplifies. As Lear's fool knows, the fool was traditionally given license to speak out where others had to be silent, which kind of goes back into what I was saying earlier, is that the jesters could get away with things that other people couldn't get away with because of their freedom of speech. Many European royal courts hired jesters to entertain at palace revelries and festivities. They were paid well, and they often dressed very elegantly and sophisticatedly, unlike how a lot of the other people dressed in theater and entertainment. Added to their wit, most had established several supplementary performance skills. Some of these include playing the lute, the flute. They danced, they juggled, they told jokes, they did acrobatics and pantomime, they rope walked, they performed tongue twisters, they yodeled, they sang, and they did vocal tricks. So a lot of times court jesters are thought of as just kind of hopping around and making people laugh just by being silly. They actually had a lot of craft in their performance and their skill. They took it very seriously and really added on to it, and each jester had kind of their own unique spin onto what he or she did. Some commonly known jesters from literature in the time include Puck from A Midsummer's Night Dream, The Fool in King Lear, and Yorick in Hamlet. So those are very, very commonly known plays, and those are the jesters. And like I said, they're not huge parts. They don't have giant roles or anything, but the play would go very differently without them. Like, they're very significant to the story. Okay, now that I've given you a detailed background on court jesters, I'm going to introduce you through my costume and kind of show you what it's all about to be a court jester, how you dress up. The jester I'm kind of channeling is Thomas Skelton. He's from the late of Muncaster Castle. He served as a court jester in the late 1500s. According to tradition, the phrases tomfool and tomfoolery originated from Thomas Skelton. So I'm going to fix up my costume a little bit, and then I'm going to show you what it's all about. Okay, so I'm going to start piece by piece on my costume. I'm going to start with my tights. So, okay. As you can see, these are solid black. All jesters wore tights, but sometimes they would wear brightly colored ones, like one green and one yellow, different colored, but usually they were just solid black like these. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the shoes. They were shoes that had curled toes. I couldn't find any, so I made mine. I just put a ball in the sock and kind of made my toes curl up, and then these are jingle bells that I sewed onto the top because they wanted to, make noise when they walked, and just to kind of liven things up, I guess. Okay. Another staple that they always wore were these brightly colored tunics. They just kind of, it's not really anything flashy, just kind of a simple dress that goes over the tights. And then there are the flashy collars that they would wear under them. This one's gold and glittery, and it was just supposed to draw attention, I guess. Probably the most prominent feature that they wore are the three pointed hats with the jingle bells, which is still on TV and movies and stuff today. The Joker on the cards in a deck of cards, he wears this hat and the curly toes. Also, the face paint, which I'm sure you saw when I was speaking. A lot of times they would wear masks or paint their face in order to show emotion or emphasize facial features. Finally, the court jesters would carry around something called a bauble. This is a bauble that I made, as I'm sure you can tell. But they carried them around to make fun of the scepters, which are what the monarchs would carry around, which symbolized authority or power. So the jesters would make a bauble out of an adorned carved head and put it on a pole, and they would carry it around just to, in jest, make fun of the monarchs. So this is my completed outfit of a court jester with the three-piece hat with the jingle bells, the tunic, the flashy collar, the black tights, and the toe-curled socks with jingle bells, and then finally the bauble and the face paint. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I had a lot of fun researching it and doing it, and I hope you learned a lot of cool facts about court jesters that you didn't know before. And thank you so much for listening.